I don't know if you guys realize this, but in America, after you buy a house and you finish paying off your mortgage and like your principal payment, every single year you still have to pay property tax. But in China, if you buy, you finish paying it all off, it's yours. There's no property tax to keep your land. It's like it's your house and it's your land. But in here we start to pay. So like, I thought that property will be mine, but no, honey, you start to pay for tax. So how am I gonna pay the tax on top of maintaining my personal happiness and go travel and have fun? Can't afford that.
One of the craziest things about China is the price of their Ubers. So obviously Uber is banned, but this is their luxury version of Didi, and you'll understand why we booked luxury when you hear the price. So there's Elliot in the front. Yeah, you got your Voss water there. You got your driver in a suit. Succulents, that's a nice touch. Chargers, plenty of leg room. You even got classical music, I'm hearing now. But for all of that, 25-minute drive for 4 people, well, split between us, $8. So $2 each. And look what she just gave us. Some nuts.
Hello, welcome back to the channel. Today, we are diving into some eye-opening revelation about China, sparked by what many are calling the Red Note. We will talk about the China's insane prices, a viral statement from a Chinese lady about property taxes, and the fascinating GDP showdown between China and the United States in 2025. Oh, and trust me, the reactions are wild. Let's get into it.
I'm just having eye-opening conversations with people on RedNote where I was asked like 10 minutes ago, what do you eat? What do you eat for 3 meals a day as an American? And I had to be like, oh, I don't eat 3 meals a day. And they're like, why? And I was like, well, I can't afford to. I'm single and I work 3 jobs just to maintain ownership of the crappy house that I'm in now. So what I do is I wake up in the morning and I drink a cup of coffee and I take my medication that helps me not want to unalive myself during the day. And that also takes away my appetite. It gives it back for a brief moment, but between the depression and the medication, I usually don't want to eat. So it's okay. It's okay that I can't afford to eat because I don't want to most of the time anyway. And then for dinner, it's anyone's game. I take free stuff wherever I can. But most of the time I just try to like get something going in the slow cooker, like a roast and potatoes or carrots, something that will give me the bare minimum of protein and carbs to keep going. And they didn't know what to do with that. And then I was asked, is it true that you have to pay for ambulances over there? Like if you have a heart attack or something, like you have to pay to like be taken to the hospital in an ambulance. And that was an eye-opening conversation because I'm sitting here and it's the 7th year after the last time I was taken anywhere by ambulance, and I never paid that bill because it was for 11 miles and it was $19,000 7 years ago. And I never paid that, so I sort of had an internal celebration when it fell off my credit report, which they don't have in China. Finish your dinner, my Chinese friends, because there are starving people in America.
So the Red Note experience has a lot of Americans reeling at how inexpensive life is in China and how many of the people that they're speaking to own their own homes as opposed to renting and can pay incredibly small amounts of money for groceries. And Americans are beginning to wake up and realize that maybe they have been propagandized too, that they're in the best system. And I mean, a lot of the left-leaning ones already knew, but a lot of people have been ignoring it and sort of burying their head in the sand in a way that's very unhelpful to them and their families. But do you know what's the more interesting thing that I didn't actually anticipate? I knew Americans would suddenly be realizing that Chinese people have it much better than the American government would like to tell them. But a lot of Chinese people who are speaking to Americans on Red Note are realizing that the propaganda they've been receiving from the Chinese government is true. America has fallen behind in so many ways. America does have most of its people working 2-3 jobs to survive, or, paying extremely high amounts of money in student debt, and all these other things that are just not really a big thing in China because everything is so cheap there. Because the communists aren't trying to make a profit off of people, so they make things cheap. And I'm not saying China is communist right now, but they are run by a communist party, and it does seem like it's delivering for its people the things communists tend to deliver. Inexpensive food, inexpensive housing, inexpensive education, inexpensive healthcare. All of these things are things Chinese people can access, and Americans, they've taken for granted that the rest of the world could be better than them. But basically, I think a lot of Chinese people right now are realizing that all these fantastical things that their government has been telling them about how America has fallen behind are true. All of these fantastical things about how the American dream has been a lie all along and it's just been about enriching rich people, yeah, that's all true. It turns out that Chinese propaganda is just is to a much larger extent than American propaganda. Let's make it a comparison. To a larger extent than American propaganda, it has been about actually assessing the world and actually assessing their situation and whether it is improving and how to improve it. It turns out that their propaganda is mostly just the government passing on mostly true information to their people, whereas the Americans keep their people so distracted that they are actually unable to see obvious truths about the world that they would find after, a short internet search, even with how biased Google is against, leftists in other countries. They do not want they don't want articles from those people showing up first. They want articles about those people from the right-wing media, from the liberal economic right-wing media, where they pretend to be liberal on social issues, but they are very right-wing on actual economic issues where it'll materially affect people's lives. Anyways, have an excellent day, and it's crazy how the propaganda is falling left, right, and center. It is falling everywhere. People are beginning to realize what's true and what's not in a way that I've never seen before, which is it's heartening. It makes me a little bit more optimistic. Have an excellent day.
We're a stupid country. China thinks we're a stupid country. A very stupid country. Take a look at Detroit. Take a look at our cities. We're a developing nation. We have to develop more than they do. We're way behind them. You take a look at what's happened to our cities. I know lots of folks in China. They think we are the dumbest son of a bitches in the world, all right? They laugh at us.
I can't believe it. I'm watching videos of Americans finally realizing they've been heavily brainwashed by their own government saying that China is bad after being on Red Note for just a couple of days. Now, I've already seen some content from there that's been shared on this platform, and I gotta tell you, they're pretty spot on. I mean, they have developed a lot in the past 40 years. Just Western propaganda just makes them sound evil. But if you were to ask any genuine Chinese person about how their country is, they'll tell you honestly. And yet the US are dumb enough to believe what their government tells them. Wow. Utterly shocking.
I made a post on RedNote the other day asking how much Chinese people spend on their groceries weekly, and the general consensus was somewhere around 300 yuan, give or take. So translated into dollars, that is about $40-ish per week for food. And then so many people commented on that post saying that food wasn't even something that they had to budget for. That like their schools and their jobs, they take care of their meals throughout the day. Even their own food and even going out to eat, it's not something that they think about because they don't have to budget for it. I couldn't imagine having so much access to good food that is healthy for you and cheap, like provided by your school, provided by your boss. Like, I don't know if you guys know this, but American school lunches are like notoriously horrific. And your job doesn't like provide you food like with the cafeteria unless you have like a really fancy schmancy high-end job in America. So the fact that like a majority of people in China work jobs that pay them enough to get good healthy food and provide them with good healthy food, their kids are provided with good healthy food at school, and the fact that they don't even have to think about budgeting for buying their own groceries or going out to eat. So it makes me wonder. It makes me wonder.
Did you know in China, when a baby is born, they give them a box full of supplies, everything that they need for the baby, diapers, clothing, and this box doubles as a crib. But in the U.S., when a baby's born, they charge you to hold your newborn. It's called skin to skin, something like that on the bill. But yeah, I just found that out.
So Americans are losing their mind over the fact that China is nothing like they expected it to be. Wait till you guys find out about Russia and the Middle East. Y'all ain't ready. I just can't wait.
I'm seeing all over my FYP a bunch of disgruntled Americans regarding how America seems more like a third world country and everything that they learned and knew about China is just not true. So if you're mad about the groceries and that they don't have to pay property tax after they pay off their mortgage, let me tell you that they have better work-life balance than we do. So during my doctorate studies at Johns Hopkins, I was sent over to China to do research with the Center of Disease Control. They do have a CDC as well. There's none of this like really super calculated, hey, you take 2 15-minute breaks and a 30-minute lunch if you work 40 hours, but if you work under 20 hours, you don't get a break except for one 15-minute break. Like, it's just like weird policies that we have in America. No, they have like a lot of freedom to leave work, go get a boba, go get an ice cream, come back. They actually support you taking naps. Like at the CDC, they used to have these like beds for you to go and take a nap if maybe you live too far from work. Otherwise, most people go home during lunch because their lunch hour was like 2 hours. 2 hours was their lunch break. Not to mention the majority of the time we were always leaving to like do PR and like relationships. So social networking is a huge thing over there. Whereas in America, everybody's isolated. You don't even know who your neighbors are, right? Like you just go straight to your house when you come home from work. But not there. Not there. I remember like we would meet other government officials during lunch and then they'll gift us like big boxes of grapes and of course alcohol. And then their alcohol is like 40% alcohol. I'm like, oh my God, I'm gonna get drunk and throw up. But we were drinking like during the day. Like it was like day drinking, like daytime drinking. And it was because we were social networking with like these people, right? And this was okay. This was almost applauded. And there's always something to do after work. So you don't just go home and pass out and like, I don't know what else we do. Like it's so toxic in America, but there's always something. So I just remember like flying LED kites, like during the summer, going to the river. There's always like an activity. And that's also why they're so slim and they're so much more healthy because you easily like, you don't just walk 5 miles, the 10,000 steps that is recommended. Like you walk like 10 miles a day. It's like just so easy to do. But yeah, they have better work-life balance, and that whole like, oh, they're them passing out at their desk, working 120 hours. No, bitch, they ain't working 120 hours. I was like given so much liberty and freedom when I was like, and I had my own executive room, which was crazy. They're so polite. They're like, oh, American foreigner, like, let's put her in an executive like room. It was so chill. Like, the majority of us were always like, I think like they were even playing video games during work hours. But I mean, they do work, okay? I want you to think they do work, they get stuff done, but there's just so much liberty. There's none of this like toxic clock in and clock out, and this snitch Nancy that's like watching you and your every move just so she could report you to HR. You know what I'm saying? Like, they don't have that shit.
The Red Note has sparked significant debate across the US, and it's fascinating to see how it has shifted perspective on China's economy and its influence on the global stage. Let's break this down because there are so many layers to it. First, let's start with the rising price of Chinese goods. This is a shock to many Americans who grew up associating made in China with affordability. Over the past decades, the low cost of Chinese manufacturing played a significant role in shaping global trade. Cheap goods allow American consumers to enjoy luxury that were once unaffordable, whether it was electronics, clothing, or even toys. But as China's economy has grown, so have wages, production costs, and by extension, the prices of these goods. Now, many people are waking up to the reality that these low prices wasn't sustainable forever, coupled with rising tension between the US and China. Some Americans are questioning if it's time to reduce dependency on Chinese manufacturing altogether. This ties into ongoing discussion about the reshoring or nearshoring, bringing manufacturing jobs back to the US or to nearby countries like Mexico. While that sounds like a great idea, the question remains, are America willing to pay higher prices for domestically made goods? That is where the dominance lies. Then we have the viral statement from the Chinese lady questioning property taxes. Let's pause and unpack that because it's a loaded topic. In the US, the idea of property ownership is seen as part of an American dream. You work hard, save money, and buy your own home, right? But even after you have paid off your mortgage, you are still tied to annual property taxes. The argument she raises is valid. Why do people keep paying for something they supposedly own? In China, the government owns all land, and property owners lend it for a set of numbers of years, typically 70. There are no property taxes as Americans know them, but critics argue that the system in China creates uncertainty for homeowners because leases may not be renewed. On the other hand, property taxes in the US fund schools, infrastructure, and local government services, make it an essential revenue stream. But it raises an interesting question. Could there be a better system? One that balances individual ownership with public needs. Now let's talk about the GDP comparison in 2025. GDP is projected at $18 trillion, while the US GDP stands at $30 trillion. This gap is still significant, but China's rise is undeniable. In just a few decades, China has transformed from an agrarian society to a global powerhouse. Its investments in infrastructure, technology, and manufacturing have been unprecedented. However, the GDP numbers only tell part of the story. While China's GDP reflects its massive population and growing middle class, the US still leads in innovation, financial markets, and cultural influence. The US dollar remains the world's reserve currency, and American tech companies like Apple, Google, and Microsoft dominate globally. So while China is catching up economically, the US still holds significant advantage in areas that matters on the world stage. But there is another angle to this GDP debate that is worth exploring. Some people argue that GDP is an outdated metric to measure a nation's property. For example, China's GDP growth has been impressive, but it has also led to issues like income inequality, environmental degradation, and high levels of debt. Similarly, the US has its own set of challenges, including crumbling infrastructure, student debt, and healthcare costs. So while both countries boast large GDPs, the quality of life for their citizens is a separate discussion altogether. What is even more interesting are the reactions to these topics online. Some Americans feel that China's rise is a wake-up call. They argue that the US needs to invest more in education, technology, and manufacturing to stay competitive. Others see it as a threat, citing concern over intellectual property theft, military expansion, and human rights abuses. On the flip side, some people admire China's rapid development. They point out that while the US often debates policy endlessly, China's centralized government can implement change much faster, whether it's building high-speed rail or transitioning to renewable energy. Of course, that efficiency comes at the cost of individual freedoms, which is a trade-off many Americans wouldn't accept. The property tax debate also sparked heated opinions. Some people agree with the Chinese lady, calling property taxes legalized extortion. They argue that once you have paid off your home, you shouldn't have to keep paying the government. Others contend that property taxes are essential for funding public services and maintaining communities. And then there is the issue of Chinese rising prices. Many commenters pointed out that this is a natural consequence of economic growth. As wages increases, so do production costs. However, others question whether China is still the world factory or if its rising prices will push companies to move manufacturing to other countries like Vietnam, India, or even back to the US. What is fascinating is how all this discussion intersects. The Red Note seems to have forced Americans to confront some uncomfortable truths about global trade, economic policy, and even their own values. It's a reminder that no country operates in a vacuum. Decisions made in one part of the country have ripple effects everywhere. In the end, the debate boils down to what kind of future Americans want. Do they want to continue relying on cheap imports from China, or are they willing to invest in rebuilding domestic industries, even if it means higher costs? They are satisfied with the current property tax system, or is it time to rethink how public services are funded? And how should the US respond to Chinese growing influence? By competing, collaborating, or both? These are complex questions with no easy answers. But one thing is clear, the conversations sparked by the Red Notes are just beginning, and they are shaping the way Americans think about their place in the world. Thank you for watching, and let's continue this conversation in the comments below. Let us share our thoughts and perspective with one another. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to stay updated on this story and more. I will see you in the next video.